All right, kids. What's going on? Did a little road show today. So hopefully you guys had a good Memorial Day weekend. Weather was so-so, but I'm recording this on Tuesday, so it's nice by the end of the day. And where I'm at is the local water tower behind me in Shoreham here. You can see, kind of looking up what's going on here, and we're going to talk about water and where Long Island gets its water from. So, not a lot of people know where Long Island gets its water from. You know, it comes kind of magical thing. You turn on your faucet, you turn on your shower, and water comes out. But where does it come from? Is the ground, right? So Long Island gets its water deep within the ground. In what's called an aquifer. So hopefully you've done those vocabulary words. And the aquifer, basically, when it rains, it trickles, it percolates, it infiltrates into the ground. It's stored there. It actually cleans it a little bit as it's going through. Kind of like how you might have heard the term percolate with coffee. If you put water in the coffee machine, it percolates through the coffee grounds and it creates that brown coffee at the end, which is delicious in the morning. But it percolates through the ground, it infiltrates in the ground, and then we pump it out. So how does it work? Well, we pump it out, and it's not just we pump it out, we drink it, we pump it out, we treat it. It's chlorinated. Some places there's fluoride added. Here there's not fluoride added, but it's basically cleaned. It's killed of any sort of bacteria, right? So any bacterial contaminant should be killed. It's tested. It's constantly tested and monitored to meet EPA regulations, even though there's some things that they can't get out of it, or maybe it's not as detectable, or maybe the ranges are disputable. But for the most part here, we have pretty good water. There is some debate in some areas where you have what's called these cancer clusters and things like that, and people might attribute to the drinking water. And we're going to get into that next week when we talk about Superfund sites. Superfund sites are sites where we have basically environmental catastrophe, and the biggest effect of it is groundwater. But this is a water tower right here. And it's kind of magic, right? You turn on your hose, you turn on your faucet, you turn on your sink, and water comes out. Now, how does that work, right? Is there a machine pumping it? Well, essentially, it's all just gravity. So the reason you see a water tower, excuse me, it's the reason it's not stored below ground or at the surface. The reason it's in the tower is because it uses gravity. If you ever taken a pool noodle or something, you lift it, you fill it up, you lift one end up high, the water will shoot out the other end. That's essentially what's happening. If the water is higher than the spigot, right, the hose, the sink, the shower, the water pressure is going to push that water out of there, right? And that's basically how it works. They're pumping deep within the ground here, right? And they have this station. There's one station a little bit farther down that way, right? But they keep it up here, and this whole surrounding area gets its water from this water tower, and it's constantly monitored and treated. I know someone who lives right over here, and they say people are coming and going all the time, and obviously you need water to live, right? So this is a super important resource, and not a whole lot of people on Long Island, maybe your parents don't even know where it's coming from, because other places don't get it from their aquifer. They get it from reservoirs, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's why it's super important. I'm going to get more into this next week with what we put into the ground, right? So some things that can affect how the way that water goes into the ground is what the soil is made of. Now, permeabilities, right? The ability for water to go through something. If you have a smaller particle like clay, it's very slow to go through. It takes about 200 years for water to go through a meter of clay, right? So if you dumped a bucket of water on a meter of clay, it takes 200 years to go through. Whereas if it was pebbles, it would be, I think it's a few seconds to go through pebbles. It goes through very fast, right? So the smaller the particle, the less permeable it is. The larger the particle, the more permeable it is, right? Another vocabulary word from they gave you porosity, and that's the pore space in between these grains, right? Larger particles have the same porosity as smaller particles. So think about it. If you go, I used to work at a movie theater when I was your age, right? Ninth grade, I worked at a movie theater, and the way they jip you, if you go to Wendy's or whatever, they fill that thing up with ice and they shoot a little bit of soda in there, and it fills like right up to the top, right? That's the pore space in between the ice, right? You might go there and go, I want no ice, right? That's how you get more soda there. Well, actually, if you had smaller ice particles and larger ice particles, as long as they're the same size, you're going to get the same amount of soda. The biggest thing about porosity is porosity stays the same unless you mix it, unless the smaller particles get in the holes of the larger particles. So permeability, the ability for water to pass through something. Smaller particles like clay takes a long time. Larger particles like sand, pebbles, goes through quicker. And porosity is the space in between, right? Porosity stays the same unless you mix the particles. And all these factors determine how water goes through the ground. And also different factors can lead to flooding, right? And this is called runoff. And the most ideal factors for runoff or flooding is if it's barren, if you don't have any vegetation, water is not going to go through. If it's smaller particles, if the ground is frozen, right, and it's a gentle slope, the water's going to hang. I'm sorry, if it's a steep slope, my fault. A steep slope, the water's going to rush down to, and that leads to more flooding. More infiltration will happen if it's vegetated, right, or you have some larger particles, right? If it's a gentle slope, not frozen ground, not saturated, dry, then the water will go in there. So all these are factors, and these guys that do the water here, they look into that, right? You might have, if you've ever had issues with flooding in your house or in your basement, it could be to the slope of the ground, or you on the bottom of a hill, right? Might have to do something with your house too, but also clay. We have some clay soils here, and that leads to poor drainage. You want more sandy soil. I don't know if you've got a pool dug or seen where they dig and you see what's underneath. It's a lot of times a lot of clay, but hopefully some sand, which has more drainage there. But that's basically it for the Long Island groundwater here in this water tower, which gives us magical clean water. And not all these places have this clean water. So we're very fortunate. And not all these places had come from the ground. Just one side story. Some places get it from reservoirs. Now, I graduated high school, and tell my age here, I graduated high school in 2001. So everyone knows what happened in 2001, right? So I went to college in August of 2001, drove up, nothing going on, right? I went to Oneonta. And on the way back, in between when I went up to college and when I came back for like homecoming, whatever it was, I came back in October or something like that. 9/11 happened, right? So I'm driving by this lake, the same lake I drove passing the way at, and there's cops everywhere, swarm, DEC cops, and everything. I'm like, what's going on here? Like this, I didn't see this on the way up. Why are there cops surrounding this lake? Now, what it was the New York City's water supplies all the way up in the Catskills, and they were worried at that time that someone was going to poison the water supply there. So, just a little side note of where everybody gets their water, and always remember that, right? So New York City, actually, they pipe it all the way from up in the Catskills. If you've actually ever seen Die Hard with a Vengeance, they drive through the big tunnels that they, in one of the scenes that they use to get to the water, pump it all the way to New York City. But this is it. Water. We're going to talk more about pollution and Superfunds next week. I'm going to post these notes. If you look at your notes in the OneNote, they'll be in there, and you'll see a cross section of Long Island, what it looks like. You'll have the aquifers there, and that's where we get our water from. And all the way in the bottom of the impermeable bedrock. All right. But that is it. So look at your notes, answer those questions, do that vocab. That's it for today. And tomorrow, there's supposed to be a space launch. That's where my live session will be. It'll be between 4 and 5. It's just going to be a chat, right? We don't have to do any video. But if we talk on that during the launch, they said there might be some weather issues, but that launch goes off. It should be at 4:33 tomorrow. They're supposed to, for the first time since I believe 2011, send human beings from America into space. We have not been sending people to space from America. It's kind of embarrassing, right? So SpaceX, my boy Elon Musk, is finally sending people. Kind of, NASA and SpaceX, private industry, have teamed together over the last few years, and they're sending people into space. So it's a pretty cool moment, and I will post more about that in the chat. So hope you guys had a great weekend. I will touch base with you guys tomorrow.